Nice.
Well, welcome back, everyone. I have a few housekeeping things to go through at the very beginning here, so please bear with me. This is a meeting of the Comprehensive Plan Advisory Committee, or CPAC. I am Ron Gilbert, the chair, the committee's chair. This is a 16-member committee appointed for the purpose of holding public hearings and concerning the development of comprehensive plan for the city of Milton and overseeing the creation of that plan. The committee has two ex officio officers or members, Laura Bentley and Paul Moore. Both are members of Milton's City Council. I'll now call the roll. Zach Middlebrooks, Kurt Nolte, Fred Edwards,
Here.
Marty Locke, Jan Jacobus,
Here.
Sumit Shah,
Here.
Todd Chernick,
Here.
Laura Whitesong, Marty Littleton, Heather Sparks, Brian Maloney,
Here.
Colt Whittall,
Here.
Larry Johnstone, Mark Arrington,
Here.
George Eunice, Laura Bentley, and Paul Moore.
Here.
Excellent. Thank you very much. At this point, I'd like to introduce someone who doesn't need an introduction at all. Bob Buscemi, back there in the cheap seats, hiding behind the mask. Tonight I'm introducing him in his new capacity, Acting Director of Community Development. Bob, as everyone here knows, brings a wealth of experience to this new role, and he'll become directly involved in the comprehensive planning process. Bob, welcome. I'd like to also introduce someone who's new this evening, Laura Richter of TSW. TSW is our consulting firm that is helping us with our comprehensive plan. This evening, she'll be presenting and facilitating portions of our meeting. Thanks very much for joining us, Laura. In today's meeting, we'll consider the topics in the sequence listed as posted on the agenda. I'd like to acquaint you with some rules and procedures for conducting this meeting. There are 2 points in our agenda when we will receive public comment. Each person wishing to speak must fill out a speaker card and leave it with a staff member of the Community Development Department. Your name will be called when it's your turn to speak. Please come to council chambers and you will be directed to the microphone. Our neighbors also have the opportunity to join us via the phone or Zoom. Here are some instructions for our remote participants. If you're joining via Zoom, everyone is muted and your videos are turned off by default to minimize any disruptions. If you would like to make a comment during the public hearing portions of the meeting, please raise your hand by clicking on the icon labeled Participants at the bottom of your screen, and then click on the button labeled Raise Hand. If you are calling into the meeting by phone, you can raise your hand by pressing *9 on your keypad. Once the moderator calls your name, Zoom participants can unmute themselves by clicking on the microphone button at the bottom of their screen, and phone participants can unmute themselves by pressing *6. All speakers are asked to identify themselves by name, address, and organization, if applicable, before beginning their remarks. Each public comment period is 10 minutes in length. In order for all to be heard, we ask that speakers limit their comments to 2 minutes. Demonstrations of any sort within this chamber are prohibited. Please refrain from applause, dialogue with the person speaking, or outbursts. Please turn off your cell phones or place them on silent. And also, please show the respect to the person speaking that you would expect to receive yourself. I know this is 2020, but let's try. Next on our agenda here is an introduction and relaunch of CPAC. Because some of you have probably been wondering what's been going on, why there has been a radio silence for the past several months. And let me just take a minute to bring you up to speed. You may recall our last meeting was beset by numerous issues. Terrible audiovisual quality and lack of a consultant to help lead or facilitate our discussions here in chambers. Simply put, we had a train wreck. After the meeting, I worked with Laura Bentley and Paul Moore to reset the project. Laura and Paul were both instrumental in securing the engagement of Steve Krokoff, and together we formed a steering committee for the comprehensive planning project. The steering committee, facilitated by Steve Krokoff, has tried to fix the problems apparent in our first meeting and also drilled down to fix the root causes. The steering committee has met once or twice weekly since its formation and has guided the development of a project plan, focused the project team on leveraging the 2016 comp plan as a point of departure, expanded staff resources engaged in the project, developed communications plans which include a focus on meeting prep packages for all of you, and helped refine the public questionnaire. You all have been copied or given a link to that questionnaire. I understand several of you have responded to it or taken the questionnaire already. Eventually, we'll want to get input from you with regard to the questionnaire prior to its being released to the public. Early in this process, it became apparent that there was a lot of wood to chop, and that I needed a backup because of my availability might become constrained because of a family health issue. We needed another pair of hands, and we needed them fast. And I'm pleased that Todd Chernick has responded to that need. Todd waded right in and has made a huge contribution to the project. Todd, without your concerted efforts, we wouldn't be here tonight because we wouldn't be at this point in our development. So thank you. Thank you very much. The steering committee is now composed of Steve Krokoff, Paul Moore, Laura Bentley, Todd Chernick, Greg Botello, Michelle McIntosh-Ross, Tammy Lowett, Courtney Spriggs, and myself. And Bob Shemy will now be joining the steering committee in his new capacity. In fact, he had his first meeting today. And he still came to the meeting, I'm pleased to say. The steering committee has brought the project to the point where the planning process can begin again. That said, the steering committee will continue its oversight of the project with weekly meetings. We want to stay on track. Now, I think we should get on with the comprehensive plan itself and hear from our citizens. Do we have any speakers for the first public comment section? Oh, we have do we have no one next door? We do have someone next door.
We have one speaker on Zoom that would like to make a public comment. Is that what you're asking?
Please invite them in.
Ms. Mackey, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and make your comment.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm Mary Ellen Mackey. I live on Cogburn Road, and I am a homeowner, citizen of Milton. We've had many dialogues. I don't know if you're familiar with the area of Cogburn Road where we live, but I'll try to explain it. It is just past Webb Road, and we live on the stretch between Webb Road and Bethany. This road is made up of, it starts out with the elementary and middle school and a daycare center right across the street. Then a relatively small, high-density neighborhood. Then there's our property. We have about a little under 2 acres. There is a 7-acre, what was a horse farm, but now is not operational as a horse farm, next door. And then we have other homeowners, small pieces for the next 2 stretches. And then there's a 10-acre tract owned by a family that lives primarily in China. And on this road, we also have Alpharetta Park. We have a church. We have a for pay ball field. We have we have two private schools, and we have Cambridge High School. So all of that is on about a mile and a half stretch of road, which is currently for the property owners. After we get past the high density area, that is now zoned 1 per acre. And one of the things that we thought was an error in the original plan was that there's no step down zoning. The high density neighborhood next door to us was allowed to have 6 per acre, 5 or 6. I think they in actual fact have 4 or 5 per acre. But we thought that step down zoning would be appropriate and not go directly to 1 per acre. And so over the last several years, I'm also a real estate professional. And over the last several years, several of my neighbors have asked me to represent them in trying to sell their property. And we have an expression that we use in real estate saying, the market has spoken. Well, the market has spoken because the only interest we received over the last several years were people who wanted to do consolidation of land and develop it for 3 or 4 per acre residences. And they looked at the overlay district plan, and said, well, it won't work. Milton won't approve that, and walked away. So what I'm suggesting is that when we redo the overlay district, that you carefully look at that stretch of Cogburn and ask yourself, does it make sense to have that 1 per acre zoning along Cogburn? That's the only stretch we're dealing with. We totally embrace the idea of a more rural community. We have no problem with that, but this has happened through no fault of the homeowners here over the years. This is just the way the development has been approved, and it's happened. At the end of Cogburn and Bethany, right at Bethany and Cogburn, there is now a veterinarian's office. Has just been added. And across from Cambridge School on Cambridge and Bethany is a high density community there. So we're surrounded. Somehow these people all got approved to do all sorts of things on our road. So we're suggesting that we allow the homeowners who are stuck here in the 1 per acre to do the same.
Mary Ellen, thank you very much for your comments this evening.
That's it. Thank you.
Is there anyone else online that would like to speak, Stacy? That concludes our first public comment section. And the agenda is CPAC Vice Chair appointment, and Steve Krokoff will speak to that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Milton's city charter anticipates that this committee will appoint a vice chair position. That's important for a variety of reasons, most of which, of course, is to act in the role of chair in the chairman's absence. Mr. Chairperson, I would recommend that this body consider appointing that position so that we can ensure that we have continuity of the work and the vice chair can step in as chair in your absence.
Thank you, Steve. May I have a motion to appoint a vice chair of CPAC?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to nominate Todd Chernick.
Do we have a second? Any discussion? Hearing none, let's bring it to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye?
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. I'd like to turn it over now to Michelle, who is going to take us back to 2016, talk a little bit about that plan and what accomplishments we've seen. Michelle?
has done. Okay, good. I have my bills for my mic. So this is our agenda, and you guys already have agendas on here. That work? Okay. Along from there. We actually could have been going through this as Chairman Ron was going through it, but let's explain our CPAC relaunch and talks about our project team. Of course, the City of Milton is project, and CPAC and Milton residents are also equally involved. Our consultant, as Ron mentioned, Laura is here from TSW. Have some sub-consultants to help us with data. Yes. Okay. I tried the back mics like we did. Already did our public comment, and okay, so here we are. So I'll just go from, and hopefully I'll stay on the mic now. So what is a comprehensive plan? Comprehensive plan is a roadmap, as you see on our slide, that outlines how the municipality's vision will be met over time. Comprehensive plans are living documents that are continuously updated, usually every 5 to 10 years. Now, we've provided you with additional information in your packets, in your binders, that talks about comprehensive planning in more detail and why we plan. There's a document in your packet called Why Do We Plan? And it talks about planning being an art as well as a science, being based in data and filled with aesthetics and so on. It's community-driven, and the plan eventually belongs to the community. The plan goals for a comprehensive plan is more or less being able to maintain and improve the quality of life for its citizens, to define the vision clearly stated and shared by all that describes the future for the community. Also to lay out policy that will protect private property rights, also to encourage economic development and support it. Providing generally more certainty for where development will occur, what development will be like, and when it will happen, and how the cost of development will be met. So those are some things that you have in your binders. Comprehensive planning is a tool to plan for growth, land uses, and connectivity. It is a foundation document for other plans that are based upon it. It also sets the policy for future growth, future development, and future conservation. Of course, definitely in the case of Milton, that's a big thing with Milton and its character. All of what we have mentioned are good enough reasons to make comprehensive planning important. It is also important to the state of Georgia. The importance and usefulness of comprehensive planning has been recognized by the state of Georgia and is a requirement for local governments. And it's tied to the qualified local government status, known as the QLG in planning terms. You all should have the rules, the minimum standards in your packets for comprehensive planning. This will be our guide for comprehensive planning in Georgia. Some things that are affected by the qualified local government status include funding for all sorts of things, economic development grant programs, bond allocation programs. There's state programs with the Department of Natural Resources. Livable Centers Initiatives is a funding mechanism through the Atlanta Regional Commission. and that is also affected. And we definitely want to keep our QLG. We've been in good standing ever since, and we want to plan with the minimum standards and to exceed them. So Milton has completed a plan in 2011 and another in 2016, which was an update of the 2011. And we will continue to build upon the work that CPAC and the community put into each iteration of the comprehensive plan every 5 years. As you know, it's an iterative process, and we want to continue with that. The comprehensive plan that is currently in effect is the 2016 plan. And as you can see on here, the vision that was established states Milton is a premier city where we strive to promote a high quality of life, create a strong sense of community and place, respect our rural heritage while guiding our future, be the best place to call home. And then the mission, we take responsibility to provide the best quality of life to those we serve. Through excellent service to our neighbors, we strengthen our cherished sense of community. Now, if we feel like we needed to add anything to that, this is the time with the process that we would do that, so we just wanted to make sure we stated that. So the 2016 plan, we have really important maps that I mentioned in that CPAC video that went out in July. I mentioned on there that these are very important to Milton. We in Milton base our future community and those with these two maps, the character area map, or as you can see on the slide, it's called the future community map per the 2016 plan, and we have a future land use map. These maps actually depict the land use policy for the city of Milton. It states clearly the narratives associated with it, exactly where certain kinds of development should go, and exactly what areas should be preserved to maintain our rural character. So first we'll look at the character area map. This map was first published in the 2011 plan. During that planning process, the community and CPAC worked to determine and define the character of the community. What came out of that exercise were these 8 distinct character areas, and I'll go through them just briefly. So it's all in alphabetical order. So Arnold Mill was determined to be rural with existing horse farms along the corridor, with a state route, 140 is the state route running through it, coming from Cherokee County. This character area was thought to be needing special attention in planning, and so it was designated as an area for master plans. Small area master plans helps to focus in to make sure we determine its future rather than to have maybe the state of Georgia reacting to the pressures of the traffic or the pressures from the commuters. So a master plan was done, but it wasn't implemented with the zoning. So this character area is something that we may need to look at, and it's part of our scope of work to look at Arnold Mill to see if we can get a future plan for that. The character area adjacent to Arnold Mill is Sweet Apple. This is a very rural character area, very large lots, some forested and some agricultural activities, and is characterized by gravel roads. The Birmingham and the Central Milton character areas have similar characteristics, but with Birmingham being slightly more rural than Central Milton. Central Milton has a few more of the 1-acre HOA subdivisions than the Birmingham character area, which has some more open road neighborhoods. Birmingham character area also has a development node at the crossroads, Birmingham Crossroads, and that has a master plan that was done in 2003. The Deerfield area is adjacent to Georgia 400, Windward Parkway, and Highway 9, and is Milton's most urban character area, providing Milton with economic viability with a mix of commercial and residential uses and direct access to Georgia 400, which leads to the Atlanta airport. There's a master plan that was done back in 2012, and this master plan was sponsored by the Atlanta Regional Commission through their LCI program, which is the Livable Centers Initiative program. And also form-based code zoning was implemented there as well. There are two character areas that flank Deerfield, and they are Bethany and Milton Lakes. Milton Lakes is mostly residential, has a lot of subdivisions with various lot sizes ranging from 5 units per acre, which is roughly a 0.2 acre lot, to lots that are several acres large. The Bethany character area is also mostly residential and similar variety of lot sizes to Milton Lakes, but Bethany also has office and retail and contains some of the form-based code zoning along Highway 9 that runs through this character area, which extended from the Deerfield character area. Now, that brings us to Crabapple. Crabapple is Milton's downtown and the location of its civic center. And this was determined during the planning process of the 2011 plan. A master plan was done for Crabapple, along with form-based code, and it's also an LCI designated area as well. Once the character areas were defined, then we were able to move to the next step to create our land use map and create categories based on each parcel for future land use. So in our future land use, this forms the base for other programs and zoning decisions. The future land use map is parcel specific, showing allowable land uses that then relates to compatible zoning options. There is a compatibility chart that links the zoning options to the land use categories, which is also a part of the comprehensive plan, and it's something that we'll get to work on later as well. The previous comprehensive plan was able to reconcile some of the inconsistencies between land use and zoning that was present on that Fulton County map, because there was no relationship there. So we were able to resolve that. And we were also able to create land use categories that were applicable to Milton. So in some of the other cities that I've worked in, their land use categories, residential, commercial, etc. In Milton, we created our agricultural, equestrian, and estate development land use. So that's one of our land uses. You won't find that anywhere else, it's just in Milton. Also, some of our other land uses like low-density residential or medium-density residential, we have definitions in the plan that talks about its densities because it's all relative. Low means low some other places and high means really high some other places. Our high isn't that high in terms of density for residential, so we created our own land use. Also, the form-based code is a zoning type, which I'll talk to a little bit later, but we have added the form-based code areas to our land use map because in those areas, there's no longer an underlying land use because those zoning categories are based on the form and not the use. So just real quick to talk about zoning and land use. So the land use categories are usually broad as opposed to zoning categories that are very detailed. The land use is underlying, as I mentioned, and the zoning goes on top. And like I said, the zoning is more specific, but it needs to be compatible and explained in the comprehensive plan so that it can be legally defensible when you try to, if you have to deny particular zoning, the land use, if it's incompatible, that is a good way to make sure it holds the decision based on the land use. So I mentioned our agricultural, equestrian, and estate residential, which is unique to Milton. Just a little bit about form-based code, and like I said, it was added to our land use map. And this type of zoning is not use-based, but it is form-based. The uses such as retail, office, civic, restaurant, etc., is usually linked to the traditional zoning, but in our form-based code, it comes with a lot of design regulations that protects the community from unsightly uses. And you'll see in an example that I have later on in this presentation, I'll show a storage unit that was made to look like something else. Storage units are usually bland, but located in our form-based code, we were able to make it look like something really appealing. And also form-based codes are usually used to create a traditional neighborhood development, and so that's why you'll see it in our Crabapple and Deerfield areas. So this slide just shows our list of accomplishments and our work program, which I'll talk to a little bit now, just to let you know it's a list of projects. So sorting out the land use in the previous maps was an accomplishment in itself, okay? But I'll talk a little bit more about some of the projects that were on this list from previous plans that were part of our to-do list in our 5-year work program. And we were able to compile that during the last planning processes. So these lists are compiled for projects to be accomplished in the 5 years between the comprehensive planning, and we'll go through a few of the notable ones. But before we jump into that, I just want to toot Milton's horn real quick. So between the 2011 plan and the 2016 plan, the Atlanta Regional Commission was really impressed with how we were able to accomplish so much of our community work program. So we had one of the most follow-through with our community work program items that we took to implementation. So I just wanted to toot Milton's horn on that. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, the location of Milton's City Hall in historic Crabapple was one of the to-do items on our work program, which we accomplished, check. This took a lot of planning, implementing the form-based code, transportation, as well as circulation planning. We did trail planning, sign planning, to make this all come together, as you can see today. Crabapple is also is designated as the city center, and this has helped secure the Livable Center Initiative designation that comes from the Atlanta Regional Commission and allows this area to be eligible for additional transportation funding. One of the other community work program items was to establish and implement a signage program for historic landmarkers and points of interest throughout Milton. We started with Crabapple. So we established this signage program with pedestrian signs, with "You Are Here" signs, with maps on them, as you can see on the pictures. Signs for the vehicular benefit, as well as the historic markers and directional signs. This has helped to brand the character areas, and so far we have started with Crabapple, and the thought is to continue with the other master planned areas, such as Deerfield and the node at Birmingham Crossroads, and so on. The community work program item from the previous plan to establish an impact fee ordinance was very successful. Development impact fees are fees charged to new development projects to cover a portion of their fiscal impact to the city in its obligation to provide additional services to the community. Milton's impact fee collections go to 4 categories: Parks and Rec, roads and bridges, fire protection, and law enforcement. Resulting from this to-do item that came out of the comp plan, we did a feasibility study for impact fees, and it was turned out that we should charge impact fees, or that we could, it was feasible to do so. And we created an ordinance in 2015 to collect impact fees. And so far, we have been able to earmark funds from that account to go towards the public safety building, which most of you probably have seen already on Highway 9. Also road projects, our roundabouts in Crabapple and the Connector Heritage Walk and so on, as well as the upcoming fire station number 42. I put that picture in there. I thought it was really nice. Thanks, Bob. So we'll be seeing that on Thompson Road. And all of these projects were able to use portions of the impact fee money to help move it along and to also alleviate some of the burden on taxpayers. So, it's a really successful project. Trails. This was mentioned in several times in our comprehensive plans, and we've had several trail plans, several iterations. It's in the fine print. I'm not going to mention how many of those, but the most recent effort that we just worked on and adopted this past August resulted in a community prioritization plan that incorporated the character areas in its recommendations, where trails should be prioritized to the types as they relate to the character areas. So the multi-use trails for Crabapple and Deerfield were recommended as 8-foot concrete trails, and we should start with Crabapple being our city center. And then soft surface trails were recommended for to locate in our green spaces. So that just shows how the establishment of the character areas really help in future planning, including trails. Okay, so our transfer of development rights program, also another community work program item, and it was established in 2013. It's transfer of development rights. I'll just real quick. It's where we are able to transfer the development rights from rural portions of Milton and transfer them into the pre-designated growth areas of Milton. So transfer of development rights doesn't even couldn't even work unless you have designated your growth areas. So that character area map was very instrumental. So we were able to establish a TDR program and establish descending sites, mainly from that AEE land use, agriculture, equestrian, and estate residential area, or the open road neighborhoods. So that development right can be transferred into the receiving areas of Deerfield and Crabapple, and that is embedded in our form-based codes. So far, we were able to save or put 21.7 acres into permanent conservation easements, and there are 6 development projects that utilize TDRs for additional densities. So on our pictures that I have here, the top left is a storage unit. That's the one that I mentioned earlier. I don't know who else have seen a storage unit that looks like this. Thanks, Bob, again, with design guidelines in our form-based code areas. And I pulled this out because this project utilized transfer of development rights to make their numbers work. And according to the developers, their numbers only worked because they were able to increase their square footage through the TDR program, which allowed them to implement some of these really good design features that we see here. So without it, we may have gotten something a little bit more bland, or it probably just wouldn't have developed in such a way. So we're able to thank the TDR program to make some of these projects viable. And of course, we're able to save some of the rural areas. So I just wanted to show the 2 plans for our form-based code areas of Crabapple and Deerfield. Some of the important characteristics for those are to promote walkable and mixed-use communities. Like I said, it's flexible with the uses because it's mostly form-based. It's heavily regulated with design standards, and this is what we use to promote the traditional neighborhood development and the small town feel. So, and also, this is the receiving areas for transfer of development rights, and the rest of Milton are to be protected. Okay, I'm winding down. So one of the other projects is to pursue green communities, which is a program that the Atlanta Regional Commission has that certifies communities with levels from bronze to platinum in terms of how many green projects they were able to implement. So in our previous plans, as a work item, we set out to become a green community through the ARC program, and so we were able to get the bronze level in 2012 and maintain that till 2021. It says 2020 on our sign, but they skipped this year because of COVID, so we got us an additional year. But there are several items in there that we were able to pursue. Some of them don't make good pictures, like resolution. We have a green resolution that talks about all the things that we would pursue. But the Broadwell Pavilion, you probably wouldn't realize, but because it was located on that old Scouts building that was there, so there's you get credit for using a site that was previously used as something else. So the Broadwell Pavilion was able to get us some points there. Also, I have some pictures of our paint collection event. It's a collection of paint and household hazardous items. So that gets us credit towards the Green Community certification. And there's several others that we can pursue, and so that we will talk about in this planning process, if we should pursue some of these and how much we should do with those. Okay. I believe this is the last one. There's a whole lot more, but I didn't want to just keep going. But Parks and Rec comprehensive planning is something that was a to-do item, and the planning department helped Parks and Rec with the comprehensive Parks and Rec master plan, as well as the Providence Park master plan. Resulting from having accomplished those plans, there are also lots of projects and items in there to do based on the list of projects and the grant opportunities available through the Land and Water Conservation Fund and the Recreational Trail Grant. We were able to submit grant applications for funding opportunities for these, and we were able to be successful to get over $300,000 in grant funding for projects in Providence Park. So it's really important to have plans so that you know where you're going and what you want to do, and to have the plans in stone, as I say, so that you can show to other municipalities or other agencies so that, for instance, for the grant funding opportunities, they were able to see that the community did sanction the projects that we were asking for, and so we were able to get those grants. And so we're moving forward with those. And I know last night we showed the projects at the council work session for the Providence Park. So overall, the community is generally satisfied with the policy directions set from the 2011 and 2016 comprehensive plans. Therefore, we plan to continue building on the work previously done. And the plan does not end of the process. Is that my time? Just kidding. The plan doesn't end here. As you can see, the implementation projects continue after we finish with the plans. So with that, I will turn it over to Laura, and we will continue with the presentations. Thank you.
Hello. Again, I'm Laura Richter. Thank you all so much for having me tonight. Can you hear me okay with my mask on? Fantastic. So I'm going to talk a little bit about scope and process in the coming slides. Milton has grown over the last several years, and the city's vision has been coming to life, as Michelle just indicated, with your amazing accomplishments since the inception of Milton. During this planning process for the 2040 Comprehensive Plan, we will be determining what is working in the 2016 plan and what needs improvement. We will also be making specific recommendations for land use, future community growth, land conservation, and sustainability. Specifically looking at the Arnold Mill study area as a small area planning project within the comprehensive plan, but we will also take it to y'all to let us know if there are other areas of the city and also the general public that we need to study and to include in this process. As well as creating a economic development plan and recommendations for placemaking and public art throughout the city. We will also be working with our transportation consultants on potential smart city technologies relating to your streets and roads, as well as public buildings and wayfinding throughout your city. We will also be making recommendations for increasing connectivity, bikeability, and walkability. Here's the process. I know you guys also have this Gantt chart, and this is looking at the next year, different milestones throughout the project. And every time we meet or periodically, we will be updating this to let you know our progress and where we are in the process. And so this breaks it down into 4 distinct phases. Right now we're in research and analysis, and we'll be in this phase until the end of 2020 as of now. We're looking at your previous planning efforts. We're analyzing your current economic data, as well as beginning the community input survey that some of you already took. We're still massaging that and making edits before we bring it to the public. We're planning a public kickoff in December. I'll talk a little bit about that later on. Our next phase at the beginning of 2021 will continue our public engagement, but also start the visioning phase. We'll be interpreting our survey results. We will be planning workshops and community education sessions, as well as looking at those small area plans that y'all identify as important. The third phase will begin in late spring, early summer, which is the draft plan. We will be creating a first pass at recommendations and a project list, such as what Michelle was just talking about, as well as holding a draft plan open house. Next summer, we will be crafting the final plan based off all of your feedback and looking for adoption by City Council, DCA, and the Atlanta Regional Commission. We have also built a website that we're calling the Milton Engagement Forum. This is going to house the survey. Some of you may have already visited this website and interacted with the 8 mini surveys that we are continuously creating and editing right now. I'm going to flip the screen and actually show you some of the features on it, so just bear with me for 1 minute. Okay, so this is the home page, and you can see we have an introduction to talk about what comprehensive planning is. We have a video below that Michelle authored and created that talks about Milton and this process. I recommend that all of you watch it if you haven't already. And at the top, there are some different tabs. They're also located on the bottom. Let me scroll down and show you that. Okay, so this feature is going to be up throughout the entire process. This is our ideas wall, and this is open to everyone. The general public can come here and they can look at the different categories: land use, parks and recreation, sources, among others, and you can click on those and type a comment in. And so throughout the process, people have this sort of open forum to give us ideas and comments that aren't directly tied to a public meeting or event, which really gives the ability for people to give us continuous feedback throughout the next year.
During process, if somebody from the community makes a comment in categories, that be retained for the community to see the comments, or will be blind to go to that same site? Can they build, or will it be blind to that?
Our team will collect them, and I think it's a great idea to include them and talk about them, maybe at different public engagement activities, whether it's a CPAC meeting or a workshop. We can, grab all that data and talk about it as a group. I think that's a great idea and a great way to use it. Absolutely. Okay, some of you may have seen this page already, but these are our draft mini surveys. We have a You and Milton survey. We have a land use and character areas survey, transportation, parks and public spaces, housing, broadband, sustainability, and economic development are below. We encourage you all to take them. Right now in their draft form, we're trying to troubleshoot if you see something that isn't working right, or if you want to suggest a different wording for a question, or you see a question that's not included. We encourage you to contact us and let us know before we bring it to the public. We want it to be as effective and as comprehensive as possible. Additionally, on our homepage, we have a button dedicated to the Arnold Mill area, because we know we will be studying that for this comprehensive planning effort. And we also have an open-ended comment area for suggestions for other areas. So people can fill out and say, I'd like you to look at this part of Deerfield or another area throughout the city. And we can talk about that as a group, just like we can with the ideas walls, and decide what else could be a small area plan. And if you need information on, I know that Greg has created a new link, but it is tinyurl.com/MiltonEF. Greg has created a link that goes directly to the Milton website. /survey. Okay, wonderful. And I know next on our agenda we have a 5-minute break, and then we are going to do an activity and look at some of the opportunities from the 2016 plan and start a group discussion. Welcome.
All right, in the interest of keeping us on time, I'd like to ask Laura and Michelle to come back up to take us on to the next section of our meeting.
Could I get the presentation? Okay, so over the next 50 minutes or so, we want to talk a little bit about what we did here in August and also to have a look back at the opportunities that were generated from the 2016 plan and use them as prompts for conversation to understand if those opportunities are still relative, if there are new ones that we need to discuss, or some that should be removed potentially. What we've heard so far from you, things that you like and love about Milton, the city staff and their efforts to improve the city, the growth in crab adults specifically, rural atmosphere and heritage, the equestrian heritage, controlled growth and low density, balance between rural and development. You guys have not sold out to commercial uses. You all love the community spirit of Milton, the family-oriented atmosphere, as well as the opportunities to get involved. Some things we heard that you would like to address or change include more recreation opportunities, more community participation, a better plan for future commercial corridors or current ones, as well as making sure to preserve large lot and farmland. Looking towards better traffic control, including speeding, walking, and riding, and facilities for riding horses, as well as managing growth and continuing on the path that you have been on, creating the identity that is Milton. You would like to see more amenities, including cultural additions and art. You would also like to discuss solid waste management throughout the city, as well as affordable housing for young professionals.
Laura, can you address the second point on the right, more community participation? Was there more context to that? In what aspect of community participation was that referring to? Yeah, I don't recall that.
Please speak into the mic.
So what I recall was just a little bit to get some of the neighborhoods that don't usually come out to some of our meetings and whatnot to sort of get a better cross-section of the community.
Okay, so specifically more community participation with this process? Is that, okay. All right, thank you.
We're evenly distributed and making sure we talk to
Yes,
to
I recall
all.
us discussing that.
All right, and so here I'm just going to read this list of objectives. These are from the 2016 plan. These are specific to development patterns and land use. And again, these are just some prompts for discussion. And when I'm done talking, I'm going to open up for all of you, whether you're on Zoom, on the phone, or here in person, to start the discussion. Objective 1 is we will encourage development that is sensitive to the overall setting of the community and will contribute to your community's character and sense of place. Objective 2, we will encourage development of a balanced network of commercial activity centers that are vibrant areas of the community which improve overall attractiveness and local quality of life, meet the service needs of our citizens, and avoid unattractive and inefficient sprawling strip development. Objective 3, we want development whose design, landscaping, lighting, signage, and scale add value to our community. Objective 4, we will create gateways to establish a sense of place for our community. Objective 5, we will encourage mixed-use developments where appropriate that are human scale, less auto-oriented, and include neighborhoods that are walkable, bikeable, and wheelchair-friendly and master plan areas, as identified in the future community map. We will be willing to assess land planning and development concepts that may be new to our area but have been tried successfully in other places. And finally, Objective 7, we support appropriate residential and non-residential infill development and redevelopment in ways that complement surrounding areas. Of the actual document.
From the original plan, it's on page 18, 19, and 20.
Yeah, it starts on page 18.
Seems to me that most of these continue to apply going forward, maybe with some minor tweaking to address what we've already accomplished or what we intend on accomplishing going forward. One example of that where establishing or create gateways to establish a sense of place for our community. I think we've made a lot of progress in establishing those gateways, so that one may need to be tweaked on what are we going to do with those gateways, for example. But the objectives largely, to me, seem applicable going forward.
Any other comments on this section of the priorities and objectives? Okay, interest of time, we'll move to the next section.
All right, Section 2 discusses community facilities and service. Objective 1, we will incorporate sustainable policies and practices and projects undertaken and services offered by the City of Milton. Objective 2, we will explore opportunities for multiple transportation alternatives. Objective 3, we will invest in parks and open space to enhance the quality of life for our citizens. Objective 4, we will seek opportunities to provide pleasant, accessible public gathering spaces and parks throughout the community. Objective 5, we will support the city in the acquisition of new green space opportunities to meet the needs of the citizens of Milton. We will work with the Fulton County Public Schools to encourage school locations decisions that support overall growth and development plans of the community. We will seek ways for new growth to pay for public infrastructure and services to support the development to the maximum extent possible. Objective 8, we will use planned infrastructure expansion to support development in areas identified as suitable for such development in the comprehensive plan. And finally, we will promote enhanced initiatives for solid waste reduction and recycling.
Yeah, I would say, just my comment on it, I think a lot of these points also continue to apply for us, but with a bit of a twist or a pivot. Last time we were focused on green space acquisition, and I think the community has spoken on several occasions of the need for more active spaces.
Ron, anyone else with a comment on that section?
Well, I thought, I know as far as active parts, I thought there was a concern about having too much active parts in the community, that would change the entire impact. But the main focus of the consensus of the group last time was more passive parks as opposed to active parks.
I believe it was, since this reflects the. When you say last time, do you mean 2016?
No, a couple months ago. Sorry.
I'm sorry. Okay. I was referring to some other interactions with the public where this has been expressed that active parks would be needed. I think the more specific need, as they articulated that evening, was active parks are few and far between in the southern portion of Milton, and instead of going all the way up to Bell Memorial Park, it'd be more convenient if there was something further south. Additionally, that would benefit the rest of us by lowering the traffic in the evenings on our streets up north.
One comment I would refer to regarding parks is in the 2016 plan, we commissioned a work program to addressed and study parks and what the needs were for the community, and that spawned a comprehensive park plan. Correct? In that plan, it identified that in fact there was a need, and the community was underserved. Maybe is another way of saying it, with active parks from that study.
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
So, to echo Ron's point, I do think that's something that we should address going. So we studied it, confirmed it. Now we have to identify what we're going to do about it, I think, in the next 20 years. Hopefully before that. But this plan spans the next 20 years.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Anybody? No? Okay, we can move to the next section.
All right. Our next section discusses housing. Objective 1, we will accommodate our diverse population by encouraging a compatible mixture of housing types, densities, and costs within the city. Objective 2, we will encourage development of housing opportunities that enable residents to have easier access to commercial services and employment opportunities. Objective 3, we will encourage housing policies, choices, and patterns that increase opportunities for people to move into affordable owner-occupied housing.
What do we think? And we can add comments later as well if no thoughts come to mind.
I have a comment on the housing. I would somehow have some sort of objective that balances housing with economic growth and development, because the two kind of go hand in hand. And if you're going to grow and create more, then you've got to have opportunities for folks to have affordable housing.
COVID.
Oh, your mic.
I think COVID may have an impact on our housing of the future. When you look at the fact that there's been some urban flight, if you look at some of the real estate, social media commentary that's out there, there appears to be a lot of cash-rich buyers coming out looking for more distance from their nearest neighbor and some more land to develop on. So that may have an impact on our development, Milton, going forward. Something that we don't necessarily have to change, but certainly assess and measure whether it's something that needs some tweaking in our current plans.
And is there a need, this is George, is there a need to consider, are there implications in zoning for houses when you think about home-based employment? You know, not just a home, you know, converting a bedroom into an office, but possibly anything from driveways to additional entrances to homes. I mean, there's really clearly a move to home-based employment or, you know, work from home. And I wonder what that does or may do to the way we approach housing and the way we ultimately even how we communicate and market it.
Thanks, George. That's a good point. You know, with the home-based businesses and having multiple offices, not just one. Maybe the kids are also schooling at home. Yeah, so that's something to look at. I think so. Yes, Laura has something.
And just addition to that, just to maybe also put a discussion point, if this group agrees, that we do need to think about our policy and strategy on short-term rentals in the housing area, VRBOs and Airbnbs.
Yeah, agreed.
I had a quick comment, and it relates back to, you know, some of the original kind of what we've heard, what we love, but in housing, you know, we often find ourselves in situations where we're talking about setbacks and, you know, barriers between neighborhoods, and do we want to add a goal here potentially that has to do with, you know, as we develop land, as we develop housing, try and use those as opportunities to preserve rural, you know, views and keep things a little more separated, keep a few more trees, etc. So, just throwing it out there.
Cool, yeah.
I just offer a thought regarding, and I'm not experiencing this currently, but I envision I could be experiencing this over the next 20 years, and that is guest housing and taking care of elderly parents or
Yep.
family members. And I know on the Board of Zoning we see a number of cases coming across for that. It seems like maybe this might be an opportunity to figure out a way to get ahead of how we manage that more appropriately, instead of on a case-by-case basis. There's case-by-case uniquenesses, but I don't know that we have a strategy around that evolution that I perceive might be happening. I'm seeing a lot of head nods that may be of interest.
Yep. You're getting at least one Zoom head nod.
I'd like to go back to Colt's comment for a moment and just say that I think should remind all of us about the initiatives we've taken recently to incent large lot development, and perhaps we might want to revisit those to see if there are other ways we can incent that sort of development, especially because that would accommodate more of the guest houses that you were mentioning, Todd.
Yeah, the large lot incentive, if there are other types of housing incentives that would move development, whether it's the buffers that Colt recommended, or those seems to be incentives really seem to work.
I would also add in there around the senior component on housing, there are a lot of changes getting ready to happen on the healthcare side for senior living. COVID has changed a lot of my friends who work in healthcare. That model's changing, so we probably need to determine what that's going to look like and how does that add into a plan for the future, because people do get older, including me.
So, Laura, does that mean that the current model where senior living is in a larger facility, maybe, and you've got smaller communities in the larger settings?
Yeah, I mean, you're seeing, I have a couple of friends who are executives in some healthcare companies, and it looks like the trend is probably to more, these exist, but small home-based care is one of the trends. But there's also many startups working in this space. I work in the tech sector, so there's a lot of innovative stuff getting ready to happen. So it's how to stay in focus with what's going on and include that in the plan.
Yeah, these are all great comments, great ideas. And if you think of any when you get home, we'll take those as well. If there's no more comments on that, we'll move to the next section.
Okay, our next section is intergovernmental coordination. Objective 1, we will proactively identify opportunities to share facilities and services with neighboring jurisdictions when they would be mutually beneficial. Objective 2, we will initiate efforts to work with neighboring jurisdictions to develop shared solutions for regional issues such as growth management, watershed protection, transportation solutions, etc. Objective 3, we will initiate efforts with neighboring jurisdictions to pursue joint processes for collaborative planning and decision-making. Objective 4, we will consult with Fulton County and other public entities in our area when making decisions that are likely to impact them. Objective 5, we will provide input to Fulton County and other public entities in our area when they are making decisions that are likely to have an impact on our community or our plans for future development. And finally, we will engage in cooperative planning between the City of Milton, Fulton County, and Fulton County Public Schools in regard to appropriate location and use of schools as community facilities, as well as needed transportation improvements to accommodate traffic to, from, and around schools, and improve opportunities for walking, biking, and other forms of alternative transport for individuals of all abilities.
Comments?
I think we would have a lot more success working with Cherokee and Forsyth, Fulton. some way to work with those counties to route some traffic that's beneficial to both sides, because right now, I don't think anybody wins.
Okay, yes, thanks, Larry. That's a good point. Anything else?
Yes, more of a question. How do we get some of the surrounding areas to work with us more efficiently? There's something we need to study or do to make that happen, I guess. Question. I don't know what the answer is, but it seems like it's sometimes a challenge.
Can be a challenge, but there are ways. Especially when you work on the planning level with the neighboring communities. We also seek assistance from the Atlanta Regional Commission. They're really good with that, getting the coordination of local governments. In fact, our Deerfield master plan, I hate to say, made us work with Alpharetta on that. But yeah, so once they see that there's a need to have that coordination, we can definitely get some assistance with that. And so if it makes it into our comprehensive plan, that also helps with pushing that forward.
I have a recent example of this type of work. We finished the City of Chambly's comprehensive plan at the end of 2019. Please go check it out online if you'd like to read it. And one of the corridors, one of the important corridors of that city is Claremont Road. One half of it is Chambly, and the other side is the city of Brookhaven. And so we decided during the process to do a sort of planning sub-study. And we both funding came from Chambly and Brookhaven, and we did a corridor study within our comprehensive plan. And so sometimes coordination can unfold that way, where there really is an interest of interlocking parcels or different sides of the street, and you want to maintain a certain character or a certain density. And that's a great way to goals for both municipalities.
I have a question regarding intergovernmental. Does that extend to, in the example of Georgia 400 and adding additional exits? I believe there's discussion around adding an exit at McGinnis, and that will obviously impact us. Is that accounted for in this objective in terms of intergovernmental coordination? Seems to me McGinnis and Bethany Bend will all take quite an impact.
Yeah. So it is a little bit more on the transportation side also, because there are transportation planning documents that speak to that as well. So yes, in here too, but also other places. But yeah, we have been coordinating with Foresight and the state and authorities on.
So it's at the state
that
level too.
Mm-hmm.
These mostly are county. I mean, a lot of our big issues are state routes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's Birmingham Highway, Highway 9, Arnold Mill, those are all state routes.
Yeah.
Maybe we put a finer point as an objective in terms of the state level coordination.
Yeah, we could do that too.
Necessary there.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Michelle, are we being proactive currently in reaching out to these other municipalities, or are we in more of a reactive mode?
No, we stay current with the land use and also the transportation coordinating committees that we have monthly meetings at the Atlanta Regional Commission. So we stay up with that so that any of the projects that are happening that affect us, we review, and anything that we are planning, we reach out as well.
As we build on what Laura was saying with the Chambly and Brookhaven example, as we know that if Arnold Mill is going to be a portion of our planned study, you know that we're going to have to engage with Roswell, for example. So we're going to have to foster that relationship to ensure that our planning is fruitful when you've got to have intercity not in control of the outcome of both sides of the street.
And in our previous plan with Arnold Mill, we did have Roswell on board, as you remember, and ERC did help us work with that plan as well, and Cherokee County as well worked on that plan. Did we lose our presentation? Thank you. Okay.
Next up, we have natural and cultural resources. Objective 1, we will encourage the preservation of natural resources areas and preserve contiguous green open spaces, development of land in appropriate designated areas as development occurs. Objective 2, we will encourage new development to locate in suitable locations close to transportation and infrastructure resources in order to protect environmentally sensitive areas, agricultural lands, and valuable historic, archaeological, or cultural resources from encroachment. Objective 3, we will consider the potential impacts to air and water quality in making decisions on new developments and transportation improvements, and we will steer new development away from sensitive natural resource areas. Objective 4, we will expand the identification, documentation, and protection of historic, cultural, and archaeological resources in the city, and when possible, encourage access by the public. Objective 5, we will promote the protection and maintenance of trees in contiguous green open space and new development. Objective 6, we will protect ground and surface water sources to promote the maintenance of safe and adequate supplies of water.
Any comments on natural and cultural resources?
Yeah, Michelle, I just comment on, and I don't know if this is the right area. We're obviously making sure that what we did in the past is still applicable. Cultural resources. We had a conversation with Brian today about public art and making that, kind of tailored to Milton. And I've gotten a lot of input and feedback from people that are very jealous of the bronze horse at Mayfield and they want to know when their horse will be coming to their roundabout by them. So public art in the form, Milton style, I think that's a great idea. I'd love to see that carried forward. I don't know if this is the right place, but I've had lots of people come.
So, because we talked about public art, that we will have it present in this comprehensive plan and all, and I think this is a good spot for it to go. Yeah, thank you.
And also to note, just on the water and some of the other sustainability themes in this section, we do have South Face as one of our sub-consultants, and they will be engaging us and talking to us about the sustainability topics that you let us know are important to you, and also about the Green Communities program that y'all are involved in.
I'd like to add for our consideration, Laura brought up public art, but other sorts of art as well. I think we lack venues for theater and for music, and I think it'd be appropriate to explore what kind of options we might have to bolster those offerings for our community.
Civic space.
But I would, as far as the comprehensive plan goes, I would throw out there that I think we're listing ourselves as an equestrian community. So if we can really focus on some of the outside art being equestrian themed, whether it's the bronze horses in the roundabouts or hitching posts or horseshoes in concrete, path or something, but equestrian themed art, we have a consistency of image for the city.
Continuous branding of our rural heritage would be great.
Yeah, so a rural heritage brand. Yeah, that'll be good. Put it in this section.
I think that's a good point. The use of the word branding. I'm not sure. Well, I don't know whether we have a brand or not, or whether it's we consciously have. This is Milton's brand. We're equestrian. Are we? We say we are. We've got some horse farms. The horse farms are going away. Have we consciously said that here is our brand? We have a mission statement and we have a vision, but I'm not sure we turn it around as far as a brand that we can use when we talk about things like economic development and the type of amenities we'd like in our town.
I would just add to that, Ron. I think you're absolutely right about the fact that we've seen a diminishing number of horse farms. I don't know that it actually requires a horse head count here to imply a sense of place that is different from the surrounding communities. I think when you get to Milton today, cross that threshold into Milton, you recognize that you're in somewhere that's different than the surrounding communities. I think part of that is just the preservation of the look and feel, whether it's the rural vistas, whether it's the open pastures, as long as we can keep those. And we know that there are programs that are being worked on today that will hopefully continue to incentivize those to remain. But I'm not so sure that it's just a horse head count that implies that there's a look and feel and a quality of life that comes here that maybe was a place in time for Milton. And we recognize that in our ever-changing community, it's really about preservation of a sense of place that's different. And that branding has a horse on it today, but I'm not convinced it's necessarily just because we have barns with horses that create that sense of place.
I would agree with that, Paul.
Agreed.
I think your average person that doesn't live here probably drives through the area for the first time, and the instant reaction is something like, "What's with all the black fences everywhere?" You know, but that's part of the brand, right? And that's it's. I don't think anybody ever made a decision that that's how it was going to be done. Yet that's kind of the way it's done around here. That's part of the brand. That's a good thing. There's a lot of things to build on. Horse fine, a lot of things we can also build on and brand.
I think we would all agree we don't care if they're goats or chickens. It's just spread out, and that is what in 2016 the word rural was removed and it was put back in at the last minute because that is the feel, the placemaking that we are seeking. And that when you hit that gateway sign that says Milton, you're in someplace special, and special is becoming different, but it's still achievable and rural in some of our most interior areas.
I think that maintaining the rural atmosphere is more important than anything else. It's that rural feel that really makes Milton.
And that is such an achievable objective with, for example, our city architect and a vet clinic that's on the corner of Cogburn and Bethany, and it looks like a little barn. And those are the things that I think that our citizens appreciate and are seeking.
And the new fire station is another example of architecture that will create that stamp of some. Maybe we should invest in a horse hoof stamp for any new poured concrete.
It's a la Brian.
But when I think of other horse communities, Aiken, Lexington, I think that branding, although that's only one part of that community, it creates an identity that helps to maintain that rural nature. Otherwise, gosh, you'll see neighborhood after neighborhood, and but if really start creating and emphasizing stuff, then.
But you do that with even wood. If you look at the signs in Crabapple, they just look so much more comfortable and rural than when you drive through a lot of other areas where everything is metal. And to me, the new signs in Crabapple add to that atmosphere that you're trying to drive.
That sort of brings us back to how do we preserve Milton, and I'd like to see us be more proactive in our attempts to preserve the low density that we have in much of our city. Currently, we have one tool or two tools in our toolbox, the TDRs and other things we've done recently with large lot incentives. But I'd like to see us add to that toolbox in the creation of a bank for development rights, which we would fund, and we would be able to use that to buy down or buy up, if you will, the development rights, so that we transform ourselves from certain 1 acre areas into minimum 3 acre areas or 5 acre areas through the purchase of development rights.
One of the comments that was made referred to our city architect in the imprint that he's put on the civic and government buildings that we all enjoy, including this city hall and future public safety and firehouses. If Bob were to go on to something else, where is that described here? So perhaps that's an opportunity for us to say the city should embark on design standards that embrace the rural heritage, so that this is a living document for the next 20 years, that the next city architect and so forth and so on.
I definitely concur with that.
Yeah, we should put that in there. Yeah. All right, any other comments on this section? Oh, any other comments on this section?
I don't know if this is the right spot for that, but there's a lot of things that already exist that really, to me, don't look like Milton. I don't know if there's a way to transform those areas. But if you drive on parts of Route 9, I don't feel like I'm in Milton there. I don't know, you can't go in and force somebody to do something, but can there be plans and policies in place to nudge people that way, to look at what they've got and redesign it or change it and put something different there?
Yeah, I mean, Bob can probably speak to this on Design Review Board. These are things we've been discussing for the Highway 9 area in relation to turnover of properties, change of ownership, and trying to identify, what the look and feel should be like from a design perspective. And I know Bob can speak to that, but I would agree. I mean, I don't know if that's economic development or preservation or both, but because we know there's properties that are open and we wanted to have a certain look and feel moving forward versus the mishmash of Fulton County, whatever we got sort of stuff.
If you like, I'll add to that a little bit. Hopefully this mic is working. I think I've been with the city for many years now, and I think we've hit a point of threshold where you're actually starting to see this brand, this Milton-esque type of character being displayed throughout the city. And slowly, because we can't really force people to do it, but we've been very strong on the encouragement side. Through attrition, as people start developing these parcels out, they become the more development that occurs the way we would like it, the more it encourages the people next door that are neighboring to say, hey, we got to join in on this. So we've been getting quite a bit of interest, especially, in the last few years, that people are coming in saying, look, we really need to develop Milton. And it is important. Everything we're doing here tonight is extremely important to make sure that we document it and get it into these plans, because I will say they are the roadmap that we use as staff to ensure that when people come in, that we have some way of saying, this is really the look and feel that the community is looking to achieve, and this is where we want to take you. So I'm really very happy with all the input I've been hearing tonight. I've been pretty quiet sitting over here, but everybody's been really doing very well with their input, and I appreciate everybody's input on this, because things like branding is extremely important. keeping the rural areas, large lot incentives, keeping natural and open spaces. All of these items that we've been discussing, I think, are really all integrated and connected somehow. When you look at this plan, I don't want people to look at each one of the PowerPoint slides are all individual, but they're really all together. So when we're looking at one item, we're really looking at all the items. So as you're thinking of things, think of it holistically. That's all I want to say. I don't want everybody to focus on just one item because it really affects everything. So when I'm looking at a new development, yes, I'm looking at the integration of some open space in there because it's in the plan that says when you develop a certain acreage, you have to provide a certain amount of, say, open space or, community type space. So all of these items that are integrated into these plans really help us as we're developing it. So everything you're doing here tonight is extremely important because it's going to give us as staff the tools that we need to ensure that we hit the mark on the style and character that you're all looking for.
Thanks, Bob.
I have a follow-up question from the comment that was made specific to Deerfield and the Highway 9 area. I believe we touched on this in the last meeting as the economics are changing. The retail environment, as an example, is changing. We've seen a lot of vacancies, and we probably will see more going forward. Bob, is the form-based code that exists there now durable to evolve that area in the manner that we would like? Or is that something that it should be considered as a work program for that Highway 9 area? I don't know the details, but you probably know them way better.
Yeah, I would say that the Deerfield area is the vision studies and the zoning that's been there and the form-based code is pretty much in place. And I always tell people I think we're now going from the planning stages to the implementation phase of this whole concept, especially in Deerfield. So what's happening is once you set the zoning, you got the vision, the plan, that's what we're doing tonight. Then you have the zoning, which is a result of what we do, the zoning changes. And then you have to give the market a little time to kind of absorb that zoning and understand it and get the financial backing, people kind of see what it is, and then to start to see it integrate into the fabric of the actual community. You have to give it a little time. If you keep changing that, it's almost like it's changing too rapidly, and then the market never really catches up to it. So take, for instance, we did Crabapple first. So Crabapple took a little time. We did the vision study. We had the form, the form-based code is the zoning. And now we're into the implementation stage. So if you walk around Crabapple, you'll start to see buildings popping up all over. But it's really been the result of many years of planning, getting all people through the system in order to see the physical construction getting vertical. So when you walk around now and you see all this, it's been 3, 4, 5 years in the making for people to actually accumulate and assemble property and get regional detention areas and get walkability and get pathways and trails. All of this planning goes into place. So I guess I'm saying it's probably best not to shake the boat too much. If you want to refine things a little bit, we can always tweak things a little that we see are holding us up in certain areas, but don't reinvent the whole wheel because then the whole market changes. Hard to catch up to it.
Thank you. That was a good explanation.
Right. Good.
I think we were on economic development.
Yeah, there.
All right, economic development. Objective 1, we will identify and put in place the requisites of the desired quality of life within our community and carefully consider costs as well as benefits in making decisions on proposed economic development projects. Objective 2, we will support programs that retain, expand, and create businesses that provide a good fit for our community's economy in terms of job skills required and links to existing businesses to locate them appropriately within the city. Objective 3, we will consider access and/or impacts to housing and transportation when considering economic development projects. Objective 4, we will consider impacts on infrastructure and natural resources in our decision-making on economic development projects. Objective 5, we will consider employment needs and skill levels of our existing population in making decisions on proposed economic development projects.
What do we think?
Wouldn't those projects be on the outskirts of Milton? Preserve the rural and the center of Milton? Highway 9, 140. We have Birmingham, Publix. Not a lot of room to bring Microsoft in. But on the edges, down by Deerfield, Arnold Mill, I finally became familiar with this last week. Seems to be those places have the transportation, they have the access to 400. Away from the interior of Milton. I think going back to the rural is starting to get like NASCAR. I used to live on a very quiet, on a very quiet road, and just over time, expansion of the other counties that are going gangbusters, and they have to cut through our area. They're finding shortcuts that they never knew existed. If we can keep that on the periphery or increase enforcement of speed limits, which are in some cases pretty high, trended off into economic development, but I think we're bringing a very affluent portion of the population, as Paul said, from Atlanta. They all want to come up here. They're fleeing Buckhead. The place to go is Milton. You say you're from Milton, there was a time that, well, remember what Alpharetta was? Now we're Milton. Now they're Milton, very desirable, and that makes it harder for some of these younger people to move into Milton, but there is Deerfield, where they could have affordable housing.
So with our planning with the character areas and where we've decided to have growth, the areas of Deerfield, Crabapple, and potentially Honor Mill have been designated for those economic development areas in Milton. So when we speak of it, those are usually the areas that we're referring to, yes?
I think the question for me is, what, from a data perspective, what is the data to make us sustainable to 2040 from a business perspective? What does the data say? What do we say? What's the budget say? Number one. What do we want that mix to look like? We've identified where we think the corridors are those still the right corridors? And what is that mix? Then develop the plan in those areas of the business mixes. But I think the other thing you've got to do is you've got to get input from the movers and shakers that deal with business property who are out there in the Atlanta area. I work with them because I'm in the startup world. They know what's going to sell and what's not. And I struggle in that. I don't think we look at that completely to understand what should our market look like, what's our pricing, and what sort of mix do we want. I don't know the answer to that. I haven't really seen it.
I would just add to that. I don't know the answer either, but it seems to me that just for the long-term stability, financial stability of the city, probably having a bit more commercial tax base could be good. Now, I haven't seen data that says that. That's just my gut feel. And that may be wrong. But in general, that's a good thing. I know that it definitely benefits Alpharetta. Their ratio of commercial to residential is pretty extraordinary, and it puts them in a very enviable financial position for the long term. So just one additional thing, And what does that mean exactly? I'm not sure, right? I mean, clearly we've already talked about all the things that we want to do. So anything that we would do in economic development has got to fit within all of the other parameters we talked about. It's got to be the right scale. It's got to feel like Milton. It can't be 20 stories tall, obviously. But, I mean, honestly, if there were Trader Joe's in Milton, we'd be there twice a day. So, just laying it out there. So, anyway.
Just saying.
Yeah, just saying.
And I was going to say,
You're right.
I wanted to say, in terms of the employment needs and economic development, but looking into what potential type of employers that we would actually want to bring here, number one, and then number two, again, just talking about where can we have any more economic development? Again, is it the Deerfield area or is it anywhere else? And that spacing and where we can project the economic development to be, or the commercial districts to still be for the future, and then what type of employers we can bring here. And then my other question I was going to ask is, when we say we will, like objective number 5, we will consider employment needs and skills of our existing population, how are we doing that? How are we able to study and determine what our existing population employment needs are? And if we do have those studies or whatever, like how can we then, work off of those studies to help improve what type of employers we want to bring to the community? Have any studies like that?
I have a published study specific to Milton. We have, the ARC type studies that talk about, the demographics and what possibly would be needed in these areas and whatnot. So I don't know if our economic development consultants could look into that. One of the other things that we have been doing in-house also was looking at some agribusiness type things for Milton, that we could utilize the rural heritage and make it and monetize it for some sort of economic development. So we're just doing some research on that to see how viable that is. But then, to your point, we definitely need to look into what that refers to.
And again, I know we talked about in the previous one about intergovernmental kind of communication, but I think this is a prime opportunity where if we can work with Alpharetta or Roswell in terms of what kind of employers we want to bring to this region or this area, that's going to help all of our communities in terms of the types of people that we want to bring here, housing, how all that's going to be affected by the type of employment that we can bring to this whole area. Because housing they may live in Alpharetta and come to Milton or vice versa. So I think, again, making sure that we're not only talking about with our related governments right next door to us, transportation and things like that, but also, thinking about economic development.
Other way to get it. How does that play into our mix? Back to the employers we want, or the residents that will continue making us successful.
There was a lot of discussion regarding rural and working farms or equestrian. Does that then, from an economic standpoint, does that evolve to being in more working farms, whether it's a winery or a brewery or event centers? Are those sort of things that we should be considering to help the rural character sustain itself over the next 5, 10, 20 years, which is the horizon that we're discussing? Bed and breakfast may be another vehicle that still maintains the rural character, and also makes it economically viable for someone to hold on to their 30-acre estate, for example. Short-term rentals were mentioned earlier as a vehicle where we can monetize the fact that that's happening. I don't think we're currently collecting any taxes, as an example, from those sort of business ventures that are happening today. So those may be some other areas of economic development that would allow us to sustain and maintain some of the rural character that exists through these creative mechanisms to monetize what they have.
One other point that I wanted to bring up in terms of economic development is also for us to not only think about the full-time, the employers that may be around in this area, but when we think of economic development, to also think about other ways of bringing economic development to our city, which may be other kinds of events or whatever that may only be once a year. For instance, we talked about, of course, the horse farms and horsing over here, and you got Aiken and you got Lexington, Kentucky. So do we want to think outside the box and develop a space where there could be some sort of a race here, and that brings economic development to our city? When there's an event like this that's once a year in the city of Milton, Georgia, you've got something that goes on. We want to think outside the box and not just think about traditional employers, but think about, hey, do we want to develop some sort of sports initiative over here in our area, like a sports academy or something like that, where you're kind of thinking outside the box and not just traditional employers and traditional things to bring economic and dollars to the city, in a way where if we had other kind of events that our city hosted or our area hosted, or we develop more areas where there's baseball tournaments or, things like that may happen once a year, once a quarter, but that also brings kind of economic dollars to the area.
I understand that George Eunice would like to make a comment on Zoom.
Yes. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. I wanted to share two observations. We've lived here about 8 years, and when I first moved here from the Philadelphia area, the company I came to work for was in Sandy Springs, right outside the perimeter. And the CEO, who lived in Marietta, said, listen, you can choose wherever you want to live. I'm not trying to tell you where to live, but don't live in Johns Creek, particularly in this area, because it's the kill zone. You can't get in and out of there in under an hour ever during anything near rush hour. And so from that point forward, I never considered living in Johns Creek, first of all. Second of all, we rented a home in Marietta near Lassiter, and it was 16 miles from where I worked, and often took an hour and 10 minutes, sometimes up to 2 hours when it was really bad. We broke our lease in 8 months and took a beating financially of the home we leased, and we decided to find a home. We found a home here in Milton, just off of Highway 9, across the street from Crooked Creek. Point of the story is, just last night, we were going to go get a bite to eat in Cumming at 7 o'clock, and stupidly got onto Highway 400 at McFarland, and it was just stopped. It took us 30 minutes to get to the next exit up from McFarland, 13. And why I'm sharing this with you is, Milton somehow has done the impossible. I don't know if it's God or fate, of still being accessible, still being a reasonably good drive to the perimeter and so on, and somehow not a kill zone. And why I say all of this is the idea of a place to live is so important for people nowadays, especially people who have a few means. If you can find a community to live in that isn't full of shopping and full of business and full of the worst kind of traffic, that's a place to live. And we may not be able to prevent all of that, some of those drive-throughs from Cherokee and this and that in the other county. But I do want to stress, I think, from my perspective and some of the folks I know and meet and so forth, there's a beauty to the fact that Milton isn't quite as commercial as Alpharetta and Johns Creek, that it isn't as far as Cumming, and that it has such a great overall residential feel in spite of Highway 9 and a few other pockets. And I wonder if the conversation around business versus residential and, kind of developing that tax base, if we shouldn't be a little more conscious of really realizing we're one of the few communities at this distance from downtown Atlanta that is actually a manageable distance to commute to almost anything near us and all the way even down to the city. And so as we think about zoning, as we think about business and tax base and so forth, let's, I hope, keep a balanced perspective on if we do too much in that area, we may actually destroy what probably makes most of us happy we live here.
I have a comment, Michelle, just from George's comment. I think that's why this this restart that we've had is to build off of the comp plans that have been so carefully done in the past, which is to take our commercial areas that have been carefully staked out, and they're precious. There's not a lot of it. And when we do this update, we need to make sure that we use those commercial areas as efficiently and as effectively as we can. There was a time when it snuck in on us. We were seeing a lot of residential uses coming into our commercial zone on Highway 9, and a moratorium was quickly applied because we can't afford that. So I think that we need to be, and maybe this is a study of what is the most effective way to use what we have. I don't think anyone wants to change that. We have 26 acres at Birmingham and Birmingham. That shouldn't change. But how is it best used? And that will help this group make some decisions, I think, for the next 20 years.
Do you have any data? I know they've got the Crabapple Antique Festival, more of an event type of thing. Do we have any idea of the economic impact it has for the business around here? Is there a way to judge that? Because, again, building off what Smeed had said, would a signature event for Milton raise awareness, crystallize our identity for those that aren't here, that don't live here, and as a way to do some economic development?
Yes, Smeed Steeplechase 2023. Watch for it.
Or a polo match, The other thing are car shows, right? I've heard lots of input from people that want to attract car shows. And they come for a day or two, and they boost the economy, and then they go to the next venue. So I think it's a great idea.
The last time we were together, there was some discussion about trying to bring in high-speed fiber to the community.
Yeah.
And maybe utilizing the city as a broker to kind of pitch that as a infrastructure for us. I don't know if this would be an appropriate section to include something like that.
Sure, and
I think it is.
DCA, don't mean to cut him off, but per the Georgia's in DCA's rule for comp planning in Georgia, they do require a broadband element now because it's such a cornerstone and important part of the community to identify and analyze. So absolutely.
It's one of our survey sections as well.
Yes, and there's a whole section on the survey for that very reason.
Yeah, I didn't really need my power turned back on. I needed my internet turned back on.
Right. Especially with people working from home and ordering in and that whole culture that's growing.
Did we have somebody try to come in? George? No? Okay. Okay. My mic was off. So, yeah, any more comments on this section? So we have our last section, one item, financing.
Okay, so financing. We will be fiscally responsible by developing and maintaining a 5-year capital spending plan that is updated annually as an integral part of our annual budget process.
I have a topic to raise under financing, and I'm not sure where this fits, but it's regarding grants and how we can be more efficient at getting grant money to do some of the things that we want to do, which is largely rural and nature trails and maintaining a lot of those rural characters, water quality, land preservation. So I don't know the wording, but it seems like putting an objective in about how the city can be more effective and more efficient at securing grant money. It may be a position, I don't know, but
Yeah, that's a good one.
Michelle, you've written grants for the
yeah,
city.
I love to do that. Yeah, follow instructions. That's all you do.
And we're currently using a grant for Providence Park for the restrooms, for the ADA trail, but we can always do more. And I think that's a great ad, is to make sure no stone is left unturned.
and maybe separate from that is identifying opportunities for bonds. So we used a green space bond to achieve an objective. Are there other bond opportunities to achieve a specific objective? Well, it could be parks related, it could be whatever related.
I'd also like to include public-private partnership opportunities, particularly on infrastructure, transportation, when you start to get into 5G, smart city technology, those definitely, even fiber, broadband sort of things. Possibly art even.
Yeah, I think so too. If we could add those items, I think it'll enhance that section. Anything else on that? Last time I checked, it was 8:08. We just have a few more line items on our presentation, and we'll be wrapping up really soon. So we will move to the next steps, I believe, is what we have next. Thanks so much for all that input. That's really helpful. Thank you so much.
But we do have an open.
There's one more. Sorry.
An open question of just are there some other opportunities that we haven't talked about here that you feel should be discussed?
One idea I was also wanted to bring up was, and again, I don't know if this goes into intergovernmental or even including in that intergovernmental section, not only state, but federal level. And again, I don't know if, for instance, and where I'm going with this is like an idea of something like a post office. I know Alpharetta's got one and it's pretty antiquated. And so I don't know if that's something where the city of Milton, and if that's a federal government idea or initiative or something like that, but something like that for our area or with Alpharetta, or I don't know how that works in terms of you have to have a certain number of population, but getting like a nicer, newer post office in our area, I think would be beneficial for the community.
I can respond to that because I chased that rabbit for a while and we got the mailbox out here. They're not building any more post offices, and I'm sad to report that. In every little town in North Georgia, there's a post office, and it makes, they just don't do it anymore.
For the federal government, or?
Pardon?
Is it the federal government is saying that they're not going to build anymore? Okay.
Right. It's just the nature of technology, and, moving paper is not what they're doing, so. Karen Handel is very involved in us not getting a post. I mean, it makes sense. There's just not enough money for them, but that's why the post.
But would they renovate current ones? Like, for instance, the Alpharetta one, would that ever be renovated? And so if they were going to do something like that, could there be some sort of a way for us to be involved in the location of where that may be, or anything like that,
Yeah, I didn't get the feeling that they were doing anything proactive with post offices. They were closing them. So I hate to be a doomsayer, but it was disheartening for me.
Yeah, you can't get a single mailbox anymore. Any new homes, they don't get a mailbox anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
Can
we were happy
I
we
throw
got a
in
mailbox.
the idea of a tech incubator from a business and a sort of community identity piece? Is there a way to look at a tech business incubating sort of enterprise or initiative that could be a way to tie in sort of a low profile from the natural resources perspective, but also a much more current and future positioned stance for the city that could tie quite a bit not only to home-based businesses, but give
home-based business as a place. I know there's one by Webb Road. There's some sort of a business there by Webb Road and that fire station off of Deerfield and Webb near Milton, near Avalon, I should say. But could we become a more committed and intentional tech hub on a small scale for small tech hub startups, that kind of a thing, in any way? Could that be a consideration for us to think about?
Yeah, we can definitely think about it, discuss it, and see where it falls. Mm-hmm. Anything else?
I brought this up in the steering committee, and that is, and it's worked its way into some of the presentation slides. So I appreciate the fact that it's been contemplated at the steering committee level. But I offer this for the larger group consideration, and that is a decision to embrace the cycling community in Milton. We know that they have an impact on our passability on our roads. We know it has an impact on our safety and quality of life here. We know it can have an economic impact on it. We talked about the idea of events. We know that the cycling community can bring events as well. I just think in the fact that the cycling community has embraced us, in the fact that it appears we're a good workout area because of the differences in topography and length of runs, et cetera, that they can get some pretty sizable groups that ride on a very frequent basis here. But I think we need to take an active step to embrace the cycling community, figure out how we can make ourselves more welcoming, more safety conscious, affects our infrastructure and road standpoint and width and sections, et cetera. And then there's a potential for economic impact as well.
I'll add to that, Paul, because I'm part of that community. They're like George Hincapie used to be a pro rider, is right over in South Carolina, and he does a lot of big events, and a lot of people from here go there. It'd be great if we could just go here. And Metro Atlanta has quite a few, and they get, anywhere 100 to 200 riders and raise a lot of money, and people go spend money after. So I think it'd be great.
One of the things I had suggested in the steering committee was that we work with some of the cycling groups that are already existing here. We know that they've got some paths that they prefer to ride on, and it's not everywhere. So the fact that we engage them early, identify their typical paths, and then make a conscious effort to make that path a safer environment for both the cycling community as well as the driving community, both young and old and everybody in between. I think we're potentially avoiding tragedy and creating opportunity for Milton with all the other benefits of it as well. And there are some sizable groups that it's only a couple of people you really need to engage for some of that good, valuable input. Look forward to endorsing that.
There's 3 big ones right up here, and that's at least 200 to 250 riders. So.
Okay, so thanks so much. That sounds like some really good ideas that we can add. And of course, if you think of anything when you're driving home tonight or tomorrow, whenever, we'll also take those comments. If we could move to our next bit, which is next steps. We'll run through those. So go ahead.
All right. So today we would like to close and just talk to you about meeting again sometime in early 2021. Get that on your radar, and if you have any thoughts about when we should meet next, then let us know. Steering committee tasks, things we will be working on behind the scenes. I will be compiling notes. My coworker has been on Zoom as well watching this, getting some notes together from tonight's meeting. We will be sharing those with our sub-consultants, considering all the different topics we talked about today, economic development, transportation, sustainability, as well as we will be establishing a date for the survey launch and close, as well as crafting a marketing plan for the survey and the public kickoff. Right now, our tentative date for the public kickoff meeting will be December 10th. We are trying to do that before the holidays. And then the next 8 weeks, we're looking obviously to prep and host the kickoff meeting. We will be hosting and monitoring the survey input. We'll be closing that probably sometime in January. And we will be preparing for our next CPAC. We'll pick another topic. Today was your community objectives from 2016. So we'll choose another section of the previous plan to discuss in more detail, as well as talking about a community education session. We have a couple that are part of the program for the comprehensive plan. We can focus on different topics from economic development to land conservation to transportation. And so we'll talk more in depth about that at our next meeting, and we can decide collectively on our first education session topic.
Hey, Laura, real quick, the December 12th meeting, the public kickoff, is that going to be an in-person meeting? Is it envisioned to be an in-person meeting?
It's envisioned to be online because we
online.
want as many people as possible to come.
Okay.
And so it'll exceed 50, exceed maybe 100.
Okay, so this group will not be meeting in person on December 10th. That was my follow-up.
Yeah,
to that.
so that's the public kickoff. So we're envisioning that as, the greater general public will be able to participate on Zoom or Facebook Live. And again, we'll be crafting a marketing plan with Greg and his team to get that word out there in many different ways. And then we will come together as the CPAC group again early next year.
Okay, so probably in January, this group would reconvene.
Yeah, probably
Okay.
mid to end to the end of January. We're trying to do it specifically after the survey closes, so we can get all that data to you guys and we can talk about it.
Great, thank you for clarifying.
No problem.
When you get ready to do the public kickoff, if you could develop a one piece that could be sent to all the HOAs,
okay,
because they directly communicate to everybody in that HOA on a regular basis. So a one-pager that can be sent out to everybody in the community will get a lot more participation, I think.
Great idea. Thank you.
I would even include something for websites, right? Because a lot of big communities have websites, so that'd be helpful.
I think you're off again.
Yeah. So if December 10th sounds great, then we could start with a save the date sort of a thing, and then have the one pager and so on, just to start getting the word out. So it seems like December 10th. I'm looking at the crowd, no objections. So hopefully that'll be our date. Okay, Ron,
Laura
public
and
comment.
Michelle, thank you very much for the presentation and engaging us in good conversation. We still have a public comment section. And Stacy, is there anyone online that would like to make a comment?
No one has their hand raised,
Yeah.
but I know that there's Miss Mackey. Hold on just a moment, Miss Mackey. Go ahead and speak, Miss Mackey, if you can unmute yourself.
Okay. I really enjoyed the meeting. I was happy to be here and enjoyed all the conversation. I want to say first that I think everyone in our little small community here totally agrees with everything that was said about the rural nature and the unique nature of Milton and how much we appreciate it. That's why we all moved here. But I want to go back also. It seems to me, as I listen to the definition of the Deerfield and Bethany communities, it seemed to me like our part of Cogburn here was consistent with being included with that. And instead, we were made the very edge of the overlay district, which goes to 1 per acre. So I think that either was an oversight or a lack of clarity about the actual mishmash that has happened on our road. And I think going to someone's comment on how we want to have things that look more rural and look more attractive. I think as you drive up Cogburn, there is definitely a mishmash look, and there's an opportunity to include it and make it something that's much more attractive. I remember what the lower half of Cogburn looked like before those two little communities were invited to join. So those became affordable communities for people, and they're much more attractive than the falling down houses that were there. So I want to encourage you to really look at that line that was drawn on the overlay district, so that perhaps there could be a consideration for moving that, to include it in the plan for Deerfield and for Bethany. The other thing I wanted to say is, as a real estate professional, one of the things that you addressed tonight was the need for housing. And there is definitely a shortage of inventory in the area, in the general area of the northern part of North Atlanta. But specifically in this area, there's almost nothing affordable under like 600,000 here, unless that is livable and in a good neighborhood and so forth and so on. So there is a need for housing that hovers somewhere around 4 to 6 in this area. That would be a kind of a middle of the road between what's in Deerfield and what's farther out into the more rural areas of Milton. So I ask you to consider that, and and thank you for all the work. It sounds like this is going great, and I look forward to being included in the future.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Mackey. Are there any other speakers this evening? No one locally in present? Okay. Then that brings us to our adjournment. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Thank you. A second. All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you all very much for your participation tonight.
Thank you.